My bank manager pulled me aside and said, "We need to discuss the $50,000 you transferred to North Korea last night." "I'm sorry, what?" I managed to croak out. "I didn't transfer anything anywhere. I was home watching Netflix last night." Sandra Walsh slid a bank statement across her desk. My account number, my name, but a transaction I'd never seen before. Wire transfer to Pyongyang Medical International, $50,000. Timestamp, 11:43 p.m. "The transfer was authorized using your online banking credentials," she said. "IP address matches your home connection. The authorization code was sent to your registered phone." I grabbed my phone with shaking hands. There it was in my texts. Authorization code 892154 for international wire transfer. Sent at 11:39 p.m. I take sleeping pills every night and I'm unconscious by 10. Sandra pulled out another document. Mercy General Hospital letterhead. My name at the top. The words made my stomach drop. Organ donation consent form. Kidney removal surgery. October 18th. "According to hospital records, you underwent elective kidney donation 3 weeks ago. The payment covers medical expenses for the recipient in North Korea." My hand moved to my left side. The dull ache I'd been ignoring for weeks suddenly felt different. I pressed against my ribs and felt something that stopped my breath. A thin scar, 4 inches long, hidden under my shirt. "I would remember having surgery," I whispered, but my fingers traced the raised skin that proved otherwise. I called Mercy General from Sandra's office. Yes, they had my consent forms. Yes, the surgery happened. Yes, the kidney was successfully removed and shipped internationally. The nurse spoke about it like discussing the weather. "Who authorized this?" I demanded. "You did, Mr. Thompson. Dr. Raymond Ashford performed the procedure. You signed all documentation." Dr. Ashford, my family doctor for the past 5 years. The man who'd been treating my chronic back pain, prescribing stronger and stronger sleep medications. The doctor who'd recommended the minor abdominal procedure 3 weeks ago to check for adhesions. I drove straight to his office, my side throbbing with each heartbeat. The receptionist smiled when I burst through the door. "Mr. Thompson, how are you feeling after your procedure?" Dr. Ashford said the kidney removal went beautifully. "Kidney removal?" I stared at her. "He told me it was exploratory surgery for scar tissue." Her smile faltered. "Let me get Dr. Ashford." He appeared moments later, tall and reassuring in his white coat. The same gentle eyes and calming voice that had helped me through years of medical issues. But now something cold flickered behind his professional demeanor. "David, wonderful to see you up and about. Your recovery has been remarkable." "You stole my kidney," I said flatly. Dr. Ashford glanced around the waiting room full of patients, then guided me toward his private office. "David, we discussed the donation thoroughly. You were very enthusiastic about helping someone in need. I never agreed to donate anything." He opened my file, thick with documents bearing my signature. Consent forms, medical history updates, psychological evaluations declaring me mentally competent to make the donation decision. My handwriting on every page. "You came to me 6 weeks ago," he said patiently. "You'd been researching kidney donation online. You wanted to help someone, maybe work through some of the guilt you'd been carrying since your brother's death. My brother Alex had died in a car accident 2 years ago, waiting for a kidney transplant. But I'd never mentioned considering donation to Dr. Ashford. I'd never even considered it myself." "These signatures," I said, studying the documents. "This isn't how I write. The loops are different." Dr. Ashford's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "David, you've been under significant stress. Memory issues aren't uncommon after anesthesia. The medications I've prescribed for your sleep problems can also affect recall. The sleep medications. Stronger doses every month for the past 6 months. Deep, dreamless sleep that left me groggy well into the next day. Perfect conditions for someone to manipulate my unconscious state. I want a second opinion," I said. "I want to see another doctor." "Of course," Dr. Ashford replied smoothly. "Though I should mention, reversing organ donation isn't possible. The kidney has already been transplanted. The recipient is doing very well, according to the reports from Pyongyang." I left his office with a referral to Dr. Patricia Vance at the University Hospital, but something nagged at me about how quickly he'd agreed to the second opinion. Too easy, too accommodating. Dr. Vance's office was across town, in the research wing of the medical school. She examined my scar with a magnifying glass, took detailed photographs, and ordered blood work that would show kidney function levels. "Mr. Thompson, I'm going to be direct with you," she said, after reviewing my results. "You definitely had a nephrectomy, but the surgical technique is unusual. This wasn't done by a typical transplant surgeon." "What do you mean?" "The incision placement suggests someone was trying to hide the surgery. A legitimate kidney donation would have a different scar pattern. This looks like it was done by someone who wanted to minimize visible evidence." My blood ran cold. "Are you saying Dr. Ashford deliberately concealed what he was doing?" "I'm saying the surgical approach doesn't match standard organ donation protocols. Combined with your memory gaps and the financial aspects, this raises serious red flags." Dr. Vance picked up her phone and called the state medical board. I listened as she reported suspected illegal organ harvesting, insurance fraud, and patient abuse. Her voice was calm and professional, but her words painted a picture of systematic criminal activity. "How many other patients could be involved?" I asked when she hung up. "That's what the investigation will determine. But if Dr. Ashford has been doing this regularly, there could be dozens of victims. The profit margins on organ sales are enormous, especially to international buyers. I drove home in a daze, my phone buzzing with calls from numbers I didn't recognize. The medical board had moved quickly, apparently. By evening, local news was reporting on the investigation into illegal organ trafficking at Mercy General. That night, I couldn't sleep despite my usual medication. Every sound in the house made me jump. I kept touching the scar, wondering what else might have been done to me while I was unconscious. The violation felt deeper than physical theft. The next morning brought a knock at my door. 2 FBI agents stood on my porch, badges visible, expressions serious. Agent Lisa Blackwood and Agent Michael Ford. They wanted to interview me about my relationship with Dr. Ashford. We've been investigating an international organ trafficking ring for the past 18 months, Agent Blackwood explained. Your case might be the break we needed. They showed me photos of other patients, men and women of various ages, all with similar stories. Unexplained surgeries, memory gaps, financial irregularities, a pattern of exploitation targeting vulnerable people with chronic pain or sleep disorders. Dr. Ashford has been using his legitimate medical practice as cover, Agent Ford said. He identifies patients with limited family support, chronic conditions that require regular medication, and financial pressures that make them less likely to ask questions. The profile fit me perfectly. Single, no close family since Alex's death, struggling with medical bills from years of back problems. The ideal victim. The sleeping medication he prescribed contains compounds that enhance suggestibility and cause memory fragmentation, Agent Blackwood continued. Combined with mild hypnotic techniques during office visits, patients can be convinced they've agreed to procedures they never actually consented to. They played audio recordings recovered from Dr. Ashford's office. My own voice, slurred and distant, apparently agreeing to organ donation during what I'd thought was a routine consultation. I had no memory of the conversation, but the voice was unmistakably mine. We need you to help us build the case, Agent Ford said. There are other victims who don't even know yet what happened to them. People like you, missing organs, manipulated into believing they consented. Over the following days, more disturbing details emerged. Dr. Ashford hadn't worked alone. His surgical assistant, Patricia Kane, had been complicit in every procedure. The hospital's billing department had created false documentation to support insurance claims for legitimate surgeries that had never actually taken place. Your insurance company paid out $45,000 for an appendectomy you supposedly had 6 months ago, Agent Blackwood told me during our third interview. But you still have your appendix. The money went directly to Dr. Ashford's offshore accounts. I pulled out my insurance statements from the past year. Procedure after procedure I'd never had. Payments for surgeries I'd never undergone. The paper trail showed systematic fraud spanning back 2 years, coinciding exactly with when Dr. Ashford had started prescribing the heavy sleep medications. How did they forge my signatures on all these insurance forms? I asked. They didn't need to, Agent Ford explained. You signed them yourself, while under the influence of the medication. The compounds create a hypnotic state where patients remain conscious but highly suggestible. You'd sign anything they put in front of you and have no memory of it afterward. The realization hit me like a physical blow. How many times had I been in that office, drugged and compliant, signing away pieces of my body and my financial security? The agent's investigation was revealing victims who'd lost kidneys, parts of their liver, corneas, even bone marrow, all while believing they were receiving routine medical care. There's something else, Agent Blackwood said, her voice gentler now. We found communications between Dr. Ashford and several other medical professionals. This operation extends beyond just one practice. She showed me emails between Dr. Ashford and doctors in 3 other states, discussing patient selection, surgical techniques, and distribution networks. The organ trafficking ring had been operating for at least 5 years, with dozens of medical professionals involved. Your kidney wasn't just sold to North Korea, Agent Ford continued. It was part of a larger shipment. The same week your organ was harvested, 4 other patients in different states underwent similar procedures. All the organs were transported together through a network that included diplomatic channels. The scope of the conspiracy was staggering. Medical professionals, hospital administrators, insurance companies, and even some government officials had participated in or turned a blind eye to systematic organ theft from American citizens. My phone rang constantly now, reporters wanting interviews, lawyers offering to represent me in civil suits, other victims reaching out through mutual contacts. I felt overwhelmed by the attention and horrified by the stories I was hearing. Robert Mills called me on Friday afternoon. He'd seen the news coverage and recognized Dr. Ashford as his former physician. I thought I was going crazy, he said. I've been having memory problems and strange scars, but I trusted him completely. We met at a coffee shop downtown. Robert, a man in his 50s, showed me surgical scars he couldn't explain. One on his abdomen, another near his hip. His medical records showed procedures he didn't remember consenting to. I lost my job because of the fatigue and confusion, he said. I thought it was depression or early dementia. Now I'm wondering if he stole parts of me too. Robert had been seeing Dr. Ashford for 3 years, receiving the same sleep medications, undergoing the same pattern of increasingly invasive procedures. His story mirrored mine in terrifying detail. That weekend, Agent Blackwood called with disturbing news. They'd arrested Dr. Ashford, but during questioning, he'd claimed protection under a classified government program. He insisted his activities had been sanctioned by federal authorities for national security purposes. Is that possible? I asked. We're investigating, she said carefully. There are some unusual aspects to this case that suggest connections to intelligence operations. But I want to be clear that even if some government entity was aware of or involved in this operation, it doesn't make what happened to you legal or acceptable. The possibility that my government might have been complicit in my victimization added another layer of betrayal. If Dr. Ashford had been operating under official protection, how many other people had been sacrificed for whatever larger purpose justified organ trafficking? More victims emerged daily. The FBI had set up a hotline, and hundreds of calls were coming in from people who'd been patients of Dr. Ashford or the other doctors in the network. Many described the same symptoms: memory problems, unexplained fatigue, surgical scars they couldn't account for, financial irregularities related to medical procedures. We're looking at potentially 300 victims across 7 states, Agent Ford told me. Some people lost multiple organs over several years. Others were subjected to experimental procedures that weren't related to organ harvesting, but to testing new surgical techniques or pharmaceutical compounds. The revelation that some victims had been used for medical experimentation made my stomach turn. People had been turned into unwilling test subjects, their bodies violated not just for profit, but for research purposes. I started attending support group meetings with other victims. We met in a community center conference room, sharing stories and strategies for dealing with the aftermath. The psychological trauma was often worse than the physical effects. I don't trust my own memories anymore, said Kenneth, a man in his 60s who'd lost part of his liver. If they could make me forget having surgery, what else did they make me forget? What else did they make me do? The group sessions were both helpful and disturbing. Learning that others shared my experience provided validation, but hearing the full extent of the crimes committed against us was overwhelming. James, a veteran in his 40s, had discovered that his teenage son had also been targeted. They convinced me to bring him in for a routine checkup when he turned 16, he said. Now he has scars he can't explain, and his immune system has been compromised. The targeting of minors added another dimension to the horror. Children had been victimized alongside their parents, subjected to procedures they were too young to understand or consent to, even in a manipulated state. As the investigation expanded, connections to my insurance company became clearer. Blue Cross Meridian had been actively collaborating with the medical network, approving fraudulent claims and sharing patient data to help identify potential victims. Your insurance company knew exactly what was happening, Agent Blackwood explained during one of our meetings. They were receiving kickbacks for every fraudulent claim they processed. The more procedures they approved, the more money they made. The betrayal by my insurance company felt almost as profound as the medical violations. I'd been paying premiums for years, trusting that they would protect me from fraudulent medical charges. Instead, they'd been profiting from my victimization. Legal proceedings began moving forward rapidly. Federal prosecutors had enough evidence to pursue racketeering charges against the entire network. But the investigation had also uncovered connections to foreign governments that complicated the legal landscape. North Korea wasn't just buying organs, Agent Ford told me. They were also providing intelligence and logistical support for the trafficking network. Your kidney wasn't just a medical transaction. It was part of a broader relationship between the trafficking ring and hostile foreign powers. The national security implications meant that some aspects of the case would be classified, potentially preventing victims from learning the full truth about what had happened to them. The government's desire to protect intelligence sources and methods was conflicting with our right to understand the crimes committed against us. I hired my own attorney, Margaret Foster, to represent me in civil proceedings against all the entities involved in my victimization. The potential damages were substantial, but recovery would depend on the outcome of the criminal cases and the ability to access frozen assets. The hardest part will be proving the full extent of the harm, Margaret explained. Physical damages are clear, but the psychological impact, the violation of bodily autonomy, the theft of your fundamental right to make decisions about your own body, these are harder to quantify in monetary terms. During discovery, we learned that Dr. Ashford had kept detailed records of every patient he'd violated. My file contained not just medical information but psychological profiles, financial assessments, and even notes about my personal relationships and vulnerabilities. He studied you like a predator studies prey, Margaret said after reviewing the documents. Every conversation, every interaction was calculated to increase your vulnerability and dependence on his medical authority. The file revealed that Dr. Ashford had targeted me specifically because of Alex's death. He'd seen my grief as an opportunity, understanding that my guilt about being unable to save my brother could be manipulated into consent for organ donation. Look at this, Margaret said, pointing to notes dated just weeks after Alex's funeral. He wrote that you were primed for organ donation conversion due to survivor guilt and medical helplessness regarding sibling death. He planned this manipulation from the very beginning. Reading those clinical, predatory notes about my most painful personal experience felt like being violated all over again. Dr. Ashford hadn't seen me as a patient to be helped, but as a resource to be harvested. The trial began 8 months after my kidney theft was discovered. The courthouse was packed with victims, family members, reporters, and protesters. Media coverage was intense, with the case being described as one of the largest medical fraud and human trafficking cases in American history. I testified on the third day of proceedings. Looking directly at Dr. Ashford across the courtroom, I described the violation of trust, the theft of my bodily autonomy, and the ongoing health consequences of unwanted surgery. "You knew about my brother's death," I said, my voice steady despite the emotion. "You used my grief as a weapon against me. You turned my love for him into a tool for manipulation." Dr. Ashford's expression never changed during my testimony, but I saw something flicker in his eyes when I mentioned Alex. Even then, he seemed to be calculating, evaluating how to use my words against me. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence: financial records, patient testimonies, recorded conversations, forensic analysis of surgical techniques, and documentation of the international trafficking network. The defense strategy seemed to focus on claiming government authorization for the activities. My client was operating under the direction and with the full knowledge of federal intelligence agencies, Dr. Ashford's lawyer argued. The organ trafficking was part of a larger intelligence operation designed to penetrate North Korean medical and military networks. The government prosecutors denied any official authorization, but certain classified documents were submitted to the judge for private review. The possibility that some government entity had sanctioned or been aware of the trafficking created uncertainty about how the case would proceed. During the trial, more disturbing details emerged about the scope of the operation. Victims had been used not just for organ harvesting, but for testing experimental pharmaceuticals, surgical techniques, and even psychological manipulation methods. The defendants treated human beings like laboratory animals, the lead prosecutor argued. They violated every principle of medical ethics and human rights, turning healthcare into a predatory criminal enterprise. Expert witnesses testified about the long-term physical and psychological effects of unwanted organ removal, the impact of memory manipulation techniques, and the broader implications for public trust in medical institutions. Dr. Patricia Vance, who had first identified the unusual nature of my surgical scar, testified about the pattern of medical anomalies she'd observed among victims. The surgical techniques used were consistent with battlefield medicine, designed for speed and concealment rather than patient safety or recovery, she explained. The defense called witnesses who claimed Dr. Ashford had been recruited by intelligence agencies to establish medical connections with North Korean officials. They argued that the organ trafficking had been a cover story for intelligence-gathering operations. Even if that were true, the prosecutor countered during cross-examination, it wouldn't justify the systematic violation and exploitation of American citizens. You don't fight monsters by becoming a monster yourself. The jury deliberated for 3 days. When they returned, the courtroom was silent as the foreman read the verdicts. Guilty on all counts: racketeering, conspiracy, human trafficking, fraud, assault, and violation of civil rights under color of medical authority. Dr. Ashford was sentenced to 45 years in federal prison. Patricia Kane received 25 years. Several other medical professionals and insurance company executives received sentences ranging from 10 to 30 years, but the victory felt incomplete. The classified aspects of the case meant that many questions remained unanswered. The full extent of government knowledge or involvement was never revealed publicly, leaving victims uncertain about whether justice had truly been served. Financial restitution was limited. While the criminal enterprise had generated millions in illegal profits, most of the money had been hidden in offshore accounts or spent on operational expenses. Victims received modest compensation that didn't begin to address the full scope of their losses. More troubling was the discovery that the trafficking network had connections to similar operations in other countries. My kidney had been part of a global trade in stolen organs, with American citizens being harvested to supply wealthy buyers worldwide. This case represents the tip of the iceberg, Agent Blackwood told me after the sentencing. We've disrupted one network, but the demand for organs continues to drive similar operations around the world. The investigation led to policy changes in medical oversight, insurance fraud detection, and international monitoring of organ trafficking. But for victims, these systemic improvements couldn't restore what had been stolen from us. I continued attending support group meetings, where we shared strategies for rebuilding our lives and our trust in medical institutions. The psychological healing was ongoing, complicated by the knowledge that some aspects of our victimization would never be fully understood or acknowledged. "The hardest part is not knowing what else they might have done," said Robert, the man who'd lost part of his liver. "Were there other procedures? Other violations we haven't discovered yet?" Some victims chose to undergo extensive medical testing to identify any additional unauthorized procedures. Others decided they couldn't psychologically handle learning about further violations and chose to focus on moving forward with their lives. My own health monitoring became a permanent part of my routine: regular kidney function tests, imaging studies to check for other surgical alterations, and psychological counseling to deal with the ongoing trauma of medical violation. 3 years after discovering my kidney theft, I received a letter from the State Department. Through diplomatic channels, they had confirmed that my organ had been transplanted into a high-ranking North Korean military official who had since died from complications related to organ rejection. The news should have felt like justice, but instead, it felt like waste. My kidney, The part of me that had been stolen and sold had provided less than a year of benefit to its recipient before his immune system rejected the foreign tissue. It's common with organs obtained through trafficking, Dr. Vance explained when I called her about the letter. The recipients often don't receive proper medical screening or post-operative care. The organs fail at much higher rates than legitimate transplants. The irony was cruel. Alex had died waiting for a kidney that could have saved him, receiving the careful matching and preparation that legitimate organ donation requires. My kidney had been stolen and shipped halfway around the world to someone whose medical team wasn't equipped to provide proper transplant care. The case continued to generate legal and policy consequences years after the initial trials. Congressional hearings examined the failure of oversight systems that had allowed the trafficking network to operate undetected for so long. Insurance companies faced new regulations requiring verification of medical procedures and independent confirmation of patient consent. Hospitals implemented additional safeguards to prevent unauthorized surgeries and protect patients from exploitation. But for those of us who had been victimized, these systemic improvements couldn't address the fundamental question of trust. How do you trust medical professionals when you've experienced such a profound betrayal of the doctor-patient relationship? I eventually found new healthcare providers, but every appointment required vigilance. I never consented to any procedure without multiple opinions, independent verification, and witnesses present during all consultations. The scar on my side became a permanent reminder of the violation, but also of survival. I had discovered the crime, fought for justice, and lived to help expose a system that had victimized hundreds of people. Dr. Ashford died in federal prison 4 years into his sentence, apparently from complications of heart disease. Even in death, he maintained his silence about the full extent of the trafficking network and any government connections to the operation. His death meant that some questions would never be answered, some victims would never learn the complete truth about what had been done to them, but it also meant he could never harm another patient, never again use medical authority as cover for exploitation. Today, I manage my life with one kidney and a different understanding of trust, vulnerability, and the capacity for institutional betrayal. The physical healing was faster than the psychological recovery, but both continue daily. The experience taught me that monsters can wear white coats and speak in gentle, professional voices, that systems designed to protect us can become weapons against us, that survival sometimes means accepting that complete justice is impossible, but fighting for whatever accountability can be achieved. My kidney is gone forever, along with a part of my innocence about medical care and institutional protection. But I'm alive, I'm whole in ways that matter most, and I helped expose crimes that might otherwise have continued indefinitely. In a story full of violation and betrayal, that feels like enough.